let's go ahead and introduce our very first speaker, who is Tonia Eaton. She is working on her visionary communication project, Connect with Storytelling, thus the topic of tonight's theme. And she's going to present an established story, a story about the speaker's life or a fictional tale of the speaker's creation. Now, I'm going off track here, but I'm going to just say this. Tonia is one of my favorite speakers because she is quite the storyteller. So guests and members, sit back and enjoy a wonderful speech from Tonia Eaton, Carrying an Orange.
I couldn't wait to visit my favorite coffee shop, the Bearded Bean in Salinas. It was the last place I visited before we went into a shelter-in-place order. It was a lot of fun to hang out at the Bearded Bean. You could go there alone and feel like you went with a friend because everyone talked to each other. The Bearded Bean cultivated a community atmosphere. But it certainly wasn't like that on my last visit. The last time I went there, all I saw were people glued to their phones. And if it wasn't for a yippity-yappity feisty little puppy trying to get my attention, I don't think I would have spoken to anyone at all on that trip. But I had gone out specifically to see real people. After a year of being stuck at home because I'm self-employed, I was eager to get back and connect with community. But instead, people were connecting more with their phones than they were with others. It's time for us to unplug and connect. Sipping on my coffee, my mind goes back to another time. It seemed like ages ago, like another lifetime. I grew up in Metlakatla, Alaska, a tiny island in southeast Alaska of no more than 1,600 people. And I vividly recall my dad was a hard worker. He would work 10, 12, and even 14-hour days without complaining. He was a truck driver in the construction industry, but he always made a point to set aside Sunday just for family. Me, my mom, and my sister. We had a tradition of going cruising in a little black and blue truck. My dad loved his little black and blue truck. There was nothing special about it. It was loud, and it kind of smelled a little dusty. But since my dad loved it, I loved the truck just as much. And we certainly loved going cruising on Sundays. And before we left, we would always look over my dad's music collection because that was a large part of our cruising. Would it be Bob Seger today? Maybe Fleetwood Mac. Or maybe today is a good day to listen to the Eagles' greatest hits. That was a big part of our cruising because we would sing right along with it. And sometimes we would repeat our favorite songs. I was always the one to remember to call dibs. Does everyone know what dibs means? It's when you get to sit in the front seat. But maybe the joke was on me after all, because I never had a place to put my drink because there was always an orange in between the seats where the drink holder is. And it was always a fresh orange, so that means it was always being replaced. I was mildly curious about it, but I figured with my dad working long days, he just needed his vitamin C. So I shrugged it off. Until one day, I was helping my dad bring the groceries inside, and I saw him. He took an orange and faithfully put it in the middle, where the drink holder goes. Now I finally had a chance to find out what was going on. Dad, why do you always put an orange where the drinks go? Then we have nowhere to put our drinks. Oh, I put it there. I carry an orange for Matthew, was my dad's cryptic response that didn't make any sense. Matthew was my 3-year-old cousin. It was still a mystery, so once again, I just shrugged it off. Until one day I was in the car with my dad, and it was just me and him. And we passed Matthew, and he was walking with his mom, my cousin Teresa. He saw my dad's truck, and he started waving frantically, and he stopped, as if he expected my dad to pull over. And that's exactly what my dad did. He leaned over me, and he rolled down the window, and he said, "Hey, Matthew, how's it going, little buddy?" "Uncle Benny, may I please have an orange?" Matthew said orange in a little boy accent that made my dad chuckle, and his kind eyes smiled even more. He grabbed the orange and leaned over me and handed the orange through the window to his mom. And as his mom handed the orange to Matthew, Matthew jumped up for joy. He was so excited. "Thank you, Uncle Benny." I remember thinking, that must be one delicious orange. "You're welcome, Matthew." And my dad gave him a trademark wave that looked more like a breakdance move. And off we drove to complete our cruise. I'm jolted back to reality way too soon when a skateboarder skates too close to my table, and I'm not quite ready to return yet. So I keep reflecting back. You see, we live forward, but we learn backwards. We don't learn from experience. We learn by reflecting on that experience. And as I reflect back on my dad and Matthew, I realized that it wasn't that Matthew loved oranges so much. It was that my dad paid special attention to him. It was that special attention that made Matthew jump for joy. And it made my dad just as happy. And I think to how thoughtful my dad was to carry that orange for Matthew. And I realized that what would have happened if my dad would have forgotten and passed Matthew, and how disappointed he would have been. But my dad made a deliberate habit of being consistent in remembering to carry an orange. If the pandemic taught us anything, it's that we need each other. We need connection. The good news is we can find it the same way that my dad taught us how so many years ago in Alaska. We simply need to be thoughtful of the people in our lives. What's something that you can do for someone so they know that you thought of just of them? Maybe it's ordering Chinese takeout, even though you don't like Chinese takeout, but you know that your spouse loves it. And consider this. It's the act of receiving. It's the act of graciously receiving. What would have happened if Matthew would have just met my dad's gift with a nonchalant, "Oh, thanks, Uncle, but next time can you please bring candy?" My dad wouldn't have been so motivated to carry an orange for Matthew. We have lost the art of graciously receiving. Think back to your last compliment. When we're given an act of kindness, it's the act of receiving that helps multiply the joy, and the giver receives the joy just as much. It could very well be that someone in your life is carrying an orange, and you're just shrugging it off, like I did so many years ago. Back to the Toastmaster.